Hey everybody, welcome to the second lecture of this module. Well, in this episode, we're going to be taking a look at, how we can design this creature in a way that feels compelling to our story. And we're going to be taking a look at the design of it. And as well, I wanted to mention that in the previous episode, I noticed I said something about getting my ideas down on the paper as fast as I can. Well, that's the sketching phase for me, right? But when I say fast, it doesn't mean that I'm rushing it or anything like that. All I want you guys to understand is that I wanted to mean that I try to avoid those ideas from slipping away from my head, because sometimes, our brains work way, way faster than we can physically work, right? So sometimes some ideas kind of eclipse others, and whenever I stumble across like a really cool idea, I just don't want it to fade away. So that's what I meant by quickly getting it down on paper. So in this case, right now I'm trying to figure out a little bit of the lighting of this character as well as the design itself. So I'm trying to figure out some shapes, some forms. What does this creature actually looks like? Because we've already taken a look at like the overall appearance, the overall looks of this giant kind of creature, right? In the sketching episodes. But now it's like showtime, right? This is game day. So this is the final thing. This is no sketch anymore. This is the final painting. So what I'm trying to do basically is to figure out all those details that we kind of not avoided necessarily, but like let's say we skipped those very tiny little details when we were sketching the whole idea of this character, this giant creature, right? Let's talk about those little details that kind of define this concept. They make this creature what it is. So, for instance, things like those spikes that you see on the head, like what are those? Is that like a crown? Is this like a king or something? So bit by bit, we kind of keep exploring until we figure out parts of the story that we didn't even think about, So this is what I wanted to talk about, because it's always like a process of exploration, of your own ideas. You don't see everything, the big picture from the very beginning. So that, I think, makes this whole process like way more fun, and enjoyable, because you don't know everything. So you kind of get into it with a level of uncertainty, I would say. But that doesn't have to prevent you from making decisions, So, yeah, see here, I'm just trying to explore what this creature, what does it look like in terms of lighting, for instance, because I imagine it like glowing or something, maybe not the entire creature, but only parts of it. So you can clearly see that I sometimes go back to those initial sketches just to check on the initial idea, what it was like. And then you can feel free to add or take away any details you want from it. For instance, here, I just made it in this kind of pose that looks like it's coming into the scene, like, as I said earlier, like it's almost like reminds me like a snake or something, like with that kind of movement. So it's basically like, hey, what are you doing here? This is this is my place, and I have to defend this or whatever. So it's basically showing us like this imposing type of I don't know how to call this. Like, yeah, it's an imposing type of pose. I hate to sound so redundant. I swear I'm not making it on purpose. So yeah, it's not necessarily like a hey, what do you do here? It's more like the creature seems quite agitated at this point. My point was to make it look like this creature just came in, from a side, from that left side. So the character was just walking towards that pyramid that we see right there, and I don't know. I mean, I imagine that this guy kind of knows what he's getting into, so he walks with caution and all that. But then imagine if this was to be like a cinematic, like an animated short or something. Just imagine how cool would it look like to have this giant creature come in from a side and do that, just move around the whole pyramid kind of thing, and then, just come upwards from behind it and just let us know how big this creature is. So, yeah, that's this is the fun part of this. You kind of imagine all these things as you draw and paint, and it's all about getting into this world that you're creating and trying to see different things, different camera angles, and the more you do, the more you see, and it's so much fun. So now, for instance, I'm just trying to also figure out some face expression, I guess, facial expression, because the previous one looked like it was kind of suffering or something, like it's in pain or something. Which, by the way, that could have been like a nice idea for the story as well, because it's almost like making our character look like the hero who must save this creature, But now, after I changed it, it seems more, what should I call this? Like angry, I guess. It's like definitely not happy to see the character. And I like the way it turns around the whole building, because it makes it look like it's protecting this thing. Here you see here you see how I go back and forth between different layers just to see check on the progress. And I also added some line drawing details on the rib cage and all that area, because I don't know what this is like. I don't know if it's like I for some reason I saw it like a skeleton kind of thing, like made out of bones, but at the same time keeping that ethereal ghost-like type of nature, perhaps more towards the tail of it, if we can call that a tail. So yeah, this is basically, it doesn't have legs. let's say it like that. So once I got to a point where I was quite comfortable with what I had so far, I started to add like some color in there. I started to get some tones, and according to what we've seen in the previous painting, this should actually obey some of those colors, and that's what I did here. Exactly that. I went for the same kind of vibe. I kind of got in there some of those blues, some of those greens as well. If you're quite unsure of which one to use, maybe, you can just use one color and then slightly paint other tones on top of it, like I did here. I started with this kind of base, which is, I can't tell right now, actually. It's quite like in the middle of blue and green, leaning more towards the blue, I think. And yeah, and then I was looking for some ways to balance this kind of dominating color. And that came through a whole process of trial and error. I wasn't really sure if I was quite testing if purple would work, if some warmer tones would work. Like, what's the contrast here, And, well, then I started to kind of also explore a little bit of the possibilities for the architecture. So I was wondering, like, what is this city? Who lived here before, or who's living here now? Since I decided to give it like a more like a ruin type of vibe to it, I think there's no one living here actually. So that also made me feel more confident about the shapes and the imperfections of the buildings, because they don't have to be perfect. They're quite destroyed and looking like quite old. So yeah, that also allowed me to not worry too much about the color and any details on the buildings or anything like that. Even though I tried, here you can see how I'm trying to make like a detailed tower or something by the side of the pyramid itself. And the reason I put like a pyramid in there is because I was wondering about like an ancient type of civilization, and making pyramids seems to be like a common thing, and I decided to go for it since it provides this kind of mystical effect, like these people, whoever built this, they believed in something else, something superior, something like a guardian, something like a god or something like that. I don't know. And then there's a whole story about that gem that we decided to put on the top of the pyramid, which, by the way, I also had a lot of problems with because I didn't know. I was not sure how would I place a gem in there and how would I make it visible from here if it is supposed to be so small. So that brought quite a lot of questions, but I eventually had to fake it from this distance at least, because we were quite far from it. And if I want this whole building to seem like quite huge and quite far, maybe I should identify the scale with some objects that we can relate to, So I'm going to talk about this in the next lessons, but right now I just wanted to mention that was quite like a struggle, especially for the color as well. I was not really sure. I decided it on the go, actually. As you can see, I didn't do anything about color decision. I didn't make any decisions about the color in the sketching episodes. I just let it kind of come up as I thought it was better, and I was basically here. I'm just taking my chances at designing some architectural elements. So I'm kind of trying to connect some of those, let's call them towers, right, with some bridges and give the impression of like a town, or like, I don't know, there's clearly something in there that doesn't look like rocks, it doesn't look like something that was naturally created. And that was my goal here. As you can see, you don't really have to create like highly detailed buildings, little buildings here and there, because think of it the following way. We're going to be covering that anyway, right? So in my case, taking the advantage of the concept that I created for this creature, which kind of opens up like this room for me to how should I address this? Maybe I should say that it doesn't put as much pressure on myself, to kind of come up with such perfect buildings, because it has this kind of, what should I call it? Like, it's like foggy, it's like a cloud effect on the tail. So I don't really have to worry too much about that. And that's a way for you to kind of take some pressure off of your shoulders. You don't have to deal with that anymore. You just, use your brush strokes to create forms and shapes. And even though in this case I created more than I should, because I ended up covering it anyway, as always, you have to experiment. You have to try, to know exactly to make your decision sometimes. And this is what I did here. As you can see, I was not really that invested into the character himself, but I was more worried about the background and the creature. So because we're going to be taking a look at the character in the next videos anyway. So yeah, this was this episode for now, and I'll see you guys in the next lecture.